Hit all bottles, win an Apache girl. The rancher took the challenge. And what happened next? The sun hung high in the sky, burning bright over the dusty trails of the frontier. Daniel Hayes, a man known in the nearby towns and ranches for his steady hand and strong will, rode slowly along the uneven road that led to the annual frontier fair. His horse, a sturdy chestnut stallion named Blaze, moved with calm precision, knowing its rider well. Daniel wore his usual wide-brimmed hat, shading his sharp eyes from the sunlight, and his boots were dusted from days of work on the ranch. Though he was a man of few words, his presence often made people take notice. He had the quiet strength of someone who had spent years facing challenges alone, relying on skill, patience, and determination. The fair was alive with sounds, colors, and smells. From a distance, Daniel could hear the laughter of children running around, the calls of vendors selling roasted corn, smoked meat, and handmade trinkets, and the faint music of a fiddle playing somewhere near the main stage. Flags and banners of every color fluttered in the hot wind, giving the fair a festive and almost magical feeling. People from all walks of life had come. Traders, ranchers, families, and travelers passing through the region. There were acrobats performing daring feats, magicians showing clever tricks, and games that tested skill, strength, and luck. Daniel had seen many fairs before, but there was something different about this one, something that made him feel the pull of adventure. As he walked Blaze closer to the heart of the fair, his eyes caught sight of a wooden platform set up in a small clearing. Several bottles, old glass in varying shades of green and brown, were lined up in a precarious arrangement. Some balanced on narrow shelves, others stacked in small towers. Above the bottles, a sign read, "Hit all bottles. Win an Apache girl's honor." The words were bold and painted in bright red, drawing a crowd of curious onlookers. People were gathering around, their voices full of excitement and speculation. Whispers floated through the crowd, stories of previous contestants who had tried and failed. Many had walked away embarrassed, their pride bruised. Some had even walked away with minor injuries from the misfired rifles. Daniel slowed Blaze and observed quietly. He was not usually one to seek attention, but this challenge felt different. It wasn't just about knocking down bottles. It was about proving skill, courage, and control under pressure. He had grown up on a ranch where every day demanded focus. Shooting targets, taming wild horses, and managing unpredictable cattle had taught him patience and precision. Still, this was different. This was a public test, with an audience ready to judge his every move. At the edge of the crowd, a young Apache woman named Nayeli stood with calm grace. She was tall and strong, yet her presence was gentle. Her dark hair was braided carefully, and her eyes shone with intelligence and curiosity. She wasn't just a prize to be won, though many around the fair treated the challenge as if she were. Nayeli represented skill, tradition, and honor, and her smile carried the wisdom of someone who had grown up understanding the value of respect and courage. She watched the crowd carefully, noting who had the confidence to approach the platform and who was simply chasing fame or ego. When her gaze fell on Daniel, there was a flicker of interest, though she said nothing. The crowd began to chatter as Daniel dismounted Blaze, tying the reins to a post near the fair entrance. He adjusted the rifle strapped across his back, feeling its familiar weight. It was a well-maintained weapon, the kind his father had taught him to handle when he was just a boy. Daniel checked the sights and made sure the stock was steady. Every detail mattered. In front of him, the bottles seemed both fragile and taunting, daring him to take the challenge seriously. "Think you can do it, stranger?" a vendor called from the side, trying to provoke him. His voice carried amusement, but Daniel didn't respond. He didn't need to prove anything to the voices of doubt. His eyes were set firmly on the bottles, each one a test of focus and accuracy. The crowd shifted, some leaning forward, others whispering, "Bets." Daniel stepped forward, the wooden platform creaking under his boots. He could hear the faint thud of his heart against his chest, not from fear, but from anticipation. He had faced wild bulls, sudden storms, and lonely nights on the range, yet this moment carried a different kind of weight. It was about more than skill. It was about composure, about showing respect for the challenge and for those who watched. As he raised the rifle and sighted the first bottle, a hush fell over the crowd. Nayeli's eyes followed his every movement, noting how he held himself with steady confidence, without arrogance. The wind shifted slightly, rustling the banners above, and Daniel adjusted his aim. He knew that even a small miscalculation could ruin the attempt. He fired the first shot. The bottle wobbled, teetered, and finally fell with a satisfying crash. The crowd murmured, impressed. One by one, Daniel continued, each shot deliberate and measured. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. Every movement came from years of practice and patience. The sun glinted off the glass, making each bottle appear both beautiful and fragile. By the time he hit the fourth bottle, a sense of tension had built in the air. People were leaning closer, holding their breath. Some whispered that he might actually succeed, which was rare, almost unheard of. Daniel paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. The final bottles were arranged in a tricky stack, and even a slight tremor could cause a miss. He adjusted his stance and reminded himself of everything that had brought him here. Long rides through open plains, quiet mornings on the ranch, the discipline of working with animals who tested his patience, and the countless hours spent honing his aim. Each memory strengthened his focus. When he fired at the last bottle, it shattered perfectly. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, their voices echoing across the fairgrounds. Daniel lowered his rifle, feeling a mix of relief and satisfaction. He had done more than hit bottles. He had faced the pressure calmly and succeeded without haste. Nayeli stepped forward, her expression thoughtful but approving. She clapped lightly, not with exaggerated excitement, but with quiet acknowledgement. In her eyes, Daniel saw respect, which meant far more than the cheering crowd. The fair continued around them, but Daniel noticed a subtle shift in attention. People who had doubted him before now looked with admiration. Some nodded quietly, while others whispered stories of his skill. Vendors smiled and children pointed, amazed by the precision of his aim. Daniel didn't seek fame, but he understood that moments like these had a way of spreading quickly, leaving a lasting impression on everyone who witnessed them. As he stepped down from the platform, he felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. His arms were slightly sore from holding the rifle steady, but his mind was alert, buzzing with the thrill of accomplishment. He looked at Nayeli, who approached him with a calm confidence that matched his own. There was no rush, no sense of entitlement, only mutual recognition of skill and honor. "Your aim is impressive," Nayeli said simply, her voice steady and clear. "But skill alone does not win respect. How you handle yourself matters as much." Daniel nodded, understanding the depth of her words. He had proven that he could meet the challenge, but he also realized that the experience was more than a test of marksmanship. It was a test of character, patience, and humility. He felt a quiet pride, knowing that he had faced the challenge on his own terms and earned acknowledgement not just from the crowd, but from someone who truly understood the values behind it. As the sun began its slow descent, casting golden light across the fairgrounds, Daniel walked away from the platform, Blaze waiting patiently for him. He felt a sense of calm satisfaction, the kind that comes from accomplishing something meaningful. Around him, the fair continued in full swing, but he knew that this day, this challenge, would stay with him long after the crowds dispersed. It was the beginning of a story that would test more than skill. It would test courage, respect, and the choices he would make next. The first part of Daniel's adventure had ended with triumph, but the frontier always had more surprises in store. Little did he know that this challenge, simple as it seemed, would be only the start of a journey that would test him in ways he could not yet imagine. Nayeli, watching quietly from the edge of the crowd, smiled softly, sensing that Daniel's character might prove worthy of the respect and friendship she valued most. The stage was set for the next part of the story, where skill alone would not be enough, and where the true test of courage and integrity would begin. The crowd that had gathered around the bottle-shooting platform began to settle, some still murmuring with excitement, while others replayed the perfect shots in their minds. Daniel Hayes stood for a moment, rifle in hand, feeling the lingering rush of accomplishment from Part 1's challenge. His heart was steady now, but the sharp anticipation that had driven him to focus earlier still hummed quietly in his chest. He knew that challenges like this never ended with a single victory. Something always followed, whether it was admiration, envy, or an unexpected test. Naeli remained nearby, her dark eyes observing Daniel with quiet curiosity. Unlike the crowd, she did not cheer loudly or call out his name. Her presence was calm and measured, a steadying contrast to the excitement of the fair. Daniel noticed her, though he did not fully understand why her attention mattered more than the applause around him. There was a sense that she was not merely watching the game, she was watching him, studying not only his skill, but the way he carried himself. Daniel lowered the rifle and glanced around at the faces in the crowd. Some were smiling, some were whispering, and a few were frowning. Among the frowning faces was a man who stood slightly apart from the others, his arms crossed and his eyes sharp with skepticism. Miguel, a rancher known for his competitiveness, had long held the reputation of being a challenging rival in any contest of skill. He had been watching Daniel closely, his gaze measuring every movement. Daniel felt a flicker of unease but quickly dismissed it. He had no reason to be intimidated. Not by Miguel. Not by anyone. His focus was on the moment, on the challenge he had just completed, and the respect he hoped to earn through honesty and fairness. Miguel pushed through the crowd and stepped onto the platform, his boots heavy on the wooden planks. "Not bad," he said, his voice carrying just enough edge to suggest doubt rather than praise. "But I don't think you did it fairly." That rifle, didn't it have a sight adjustment? Something special? The crowd hushed again, leaning in as tension began to build. Daniel remained calm, his eyes steady on Miguel. He had been through many situations that tested patience, from taming wild stallions to herding cattle through stormy plains. This was merely another kind of test. "I shot with the same aim I always use," Daniel said evenly, his voice firm but not confrontational. Nothing more, nothing less. He did not lower himself to anger or defensiveness. He simply stated the truth. Naeli stepped forward at that moment, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "If there is doubt, there should be a fair test," she said calmly. "Not accusations. Let skill and honesty decide, not words or assumptions." Her presence had a weight of authority, and the crowd responded with quiet murmurs of agreement. Miguel scowled, but nodded reluctantly. The local judge, an older man with a thick mustache and years of experience overseeing contests at the fair, spoke next. "Very well," he said, his voice carrying over the fairgrounds. "We will have a second round. Same bottles, same platform. No adjustments, no aids. Let the skill of the shooter and the integrity of the person prove the result." He turned to Daniel. "Do you accept?" Daniel nodded without hesitation. He felt a calm certainty settle over him. The first round had tested his aim and focus, but this new challenge would test his patience, integrity, and composure. He glanced briefly at Naeli, who gave a subtle nod. The silent acknowledgement from her carried more meaning than all the applause and cheers combined. It was respect, and Daniel understood that it was not given lightly. The crowd began to shift and murmur in anticipation of the second round. Vendors leaned forward from their booths, children pressed closer to the ropes, and families gathered to watch. Even the animals seemed to sense the tension. Horses stamped their hooves and dogs barked occasionally, adding a faint rhythm to the rising suspense. Daniel felt the familiar weight of the rifle against his shoulder and took a slow, steadying breath. His training on the ranch, where long hours of practice and patience were required, had prepared him for moments like this. Every careful calculation of wind, distance, and stance mattered now more than ever. He took his position at the platform once again, feet steady, shoulders squared. The bottles looked almost identical to the first round, yet somehow more daunting under the heightened expectations. Daniel's eyes scanned them carefully, noting their positions, the slight imbalance in a few, and the narrow margins for error. He knew that even a small miscalculation could undo the perfect rhythm he had established earlier. The first shot rang out, and the bottle toppled cleanly. The crowd murmured, impressed by his calm composure. Daniel adjusted his aim for the second shot. letting his experience guide him rather than rushing through the motions. Each bottle fell in turn, the sound of glass shattering crisp and satisfying. The tension grew with each successive hit, until only a few bottles remained. The air seemed heavier now, filled with anticipation, every breath from the onlookers held in suspense. Miguel watched from the sidelines, arms still crossed, his expression unreadable. Daniel could feel the weight of scrutiny, but he did not waver. He reminded himself that this was not about proving superiority over Miguel or anyone else. It was about staying true to himself and facing the challenge with integrity. His fingers tightened slightly around the rifle and he took another deep breath, clearing his mind of distraction. Nayeli's eyes never left him. She noticed how he adjusted his stance subtly, how he moved with careful precision rather than haste. She could see that he was not simply relying on skill alone, but on patience, focus, and calm reasoning. In her culture, these qualities were as valuable as any display of physical ability. She recognized that Daniel's success in this second round would mean far more than hitting bottles. It would show respect for the challenge, for himself, and for those who watched. The final bottle loomed at the far edge of the platform, delicate and precarious. Daniel steadied his rifle, aligning his sights carefully. The sun reflected off the glass, momentarily blinding him with a brief flash of light. He did not panic. He exhaled slowly, letting the rhythm of his breath guide his aim. He remembered his father's lessons from long ago. Never rush. Let patience and focus do the work. The words resonated in his mind, steadying his hand. He squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck perfectly. The final bottle teetered and fell with a satisfying crash. The crowd erupted louder than before, their excitement blending with awe. Children cheered, adults clapped, and even Miguel's expression softened into reluctant acknowledgement. Daniel lowered the rifle, a sense of calm triumph washing over him. This was more than skill. This was integrity, patience, and composure under pressure. Nayeli stepped forward, her gaze meeting Daniel's. Her smile was subtle, a quiet acknowledgement of respect and approval.
"You have proven more than aim," she said, her voice carrying clearly over the noise of the crowd.
You have shown patience, honesty, and focus. These are qualities that matter as much as skill. Her words resonated with Daniel, confirming what he had already sensed. The challenge was about more than knocking bottles down. It was about demonstrating character, and he had passed the test. The fairgrounds buzzed with conversation, everyone eager to retell the story of the 2 rounds, of Daniel's calm confidence, and of the flawless final shots. Vendors smiled, some approaching to congratulate him, while children mimicked the stance and aim they had seen moments ago. Daniel allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction, but remained humble, knowing that today's challenge was just one part of a larger story, one that would test him in ways he had yet to discover. As he stepped away from the platform, Blaze nuzzled him gently, sensing the mixture of calm and triumph in his rider. Daniel patted the horse's neck and glanced once more at Nayeli. Their eyes met, and there was a silent understanding, a recognition of mutual respect and shared acknowledgement of what had just transpired. It was a moment of quiet triumph, standing amid the noise and excitement of the fair, where skill, honesty, and patience had been rewarded. Even as the crowd began to disperse slightly, whispers of admiration continued to ripple through the fairgrounds. People spoke of the rancher who had faced the challenge with calm confidence and emerged victorious, not just by aim, but by character. Daniel knew that this moment would stay with him, not because of applause or recognition, but because it had confirmed what he already valued, that true success came from focus, patience, and respect for the challenge itself. The sun continued its slow descent, casting long golden shadows across the fairgrounds. Daniel took one last look at the platform and the fallen bottles, a faint smile crossing his face. He had faced the challenge fully, without shortcuts, without deceit, and with a steady heart. Ahead lay more experiences, more tests, and more moments that would require courage and integrity. But for now he allowed himself a quiet satisfaction, knowing that he had proven his skill, his patience, and, most importantly, his character. The applause and cheers from Daniel's second round of perfect shots had barely settled when a ripple of tension moved through the crowd. Miguel, the rival rancher, had not left the platform. Instead, he stepped forward, his expression hard and calculating. His dark eyes narrowed as he looked at Daniel, not with admiration, but with a challenge unspoken. "You may have hit all the bottles," Miguel said, his voice carrying a controlled edge. "But that doesn't prove anything. Anyone can get lucky once. I say we test the skill again, without any chance of adjustment or trickery." The crowd murmured uneasily, glancing from Daniel to Miguel. Some were eager for a second round, excited by the drama, while others whispered doubts, worried that the competition was turning contentious. Daniel felt a flicker of irritation, but he quickly pushed it aside. He had faced far more dangerous situations than an argument over bottles. Lightning storms, runaway cattle, and the vast, lonely plains had tested him in ways Miguel could not imagine. Still, he understood the wisdom in Nayeli's earlier words. This was not about proving superiority. It was about demonstrating character, patience, and integrity. Nayeli, who had watched Daniel carefully throughout the contest, now stepped closer. Her voice, calm and confident, carried across the clearing. "If there was doubt, there should be a fair solution," she said. "Not accusations, not insults. Let the skill and honesty of the person decide." Her words carried weight. The crowd fell silent, listening intently. Miguel's jaw tightened, but he nodded reluctantly. He respected Nayeli, and her calm authority made it difficult for anyone to argue. The judge, a tall man with a lined face that spoke of years overseeing competitions, raised his hand.
"Very well," he said. "There will be a third round."
This time, stricter rules apply. No adjustments, no aids, and no deviation from the challenge setup. If Mr. Hayes can hit all the bottles again, it will be a clear demonstration of his skill and integrity. He turned to Daniel. "Do you accept this?" Daniel considered briefly. The challenge was tougher than before, and the stakes had risen not just in skill but in character. He could feel the eyes of the crowd, of Nayeli, and even Miguel on him. This round would test his patience and composure as much as his aim. He nodded slowly, understanding that this was the moment to prove that his previous success was not luck or accident. He accepted. The platform was reset carefully. The bottles were arranged exactly as before, though this time they seemed more menacing, as if daring him to fail. Daniel took his place, adjusting his stance with deliberate precision. His fingers gripped the rifle firmly, but his movements were calm and controlled. He surveyed the bottles, noting each angle, each subtle imbalance, and each challenging position. The crowd held its collective breath, sensing that this round was different. More than a contest, it was a test of true skill and integrity. Miguel watched from the sidelines, arms crossed, leaning slightly forward. His expression suggested disbelief, but Daniel did not let it distract him. He reminded himself of the long hours on the ranch, the patience learned from working with unpredictable animals, and the focus required for each precise task. This was another kind of challenge, one that required steady hands, a calm mind, and unwavering patience. The first shot rang out clean and decisive. The bottle toppled exactly as Daniel had anticipated. The crowd exhaled in relief and excitement, some leaning forward to see the next shot. Daniel moved with care, not rushing, taking each opportunity to ensure precision. Each bottle fell with satisfying clarity, the sound of shattering glass echoing across the fairgrounds. Daniel's calm, deliberate movements contrasted sharply with the murmurs of the crowd, who seemed almost frantic with anticipation. As he approached the last few bottles, the tension grew. Miguel stepped slightly closer, though he did not speak. Daniel could feel the weight of expectation pressing down, the challenge now as much psychological as physical. He closed his eyes briefly, centering himself. He thought of the wide plains, the quiet mornings before sunrise, and the countless hours spent perfecting his aim. He thought of Nayeli's calm, steady presence and the silent respect she had shown him. These thoughts grounded him. The final bottle loomed at the far edge of the platform. It was small, delicate, and slightly tilted, One wrong move could send the sequence crashing into failure. Daniel steadied his breath, feeling the rhythm of the rifle against his shoulder. He exhaled slowly, cleared his mind, and aligned his sights. The world seemed to hold its breath with him. Then, with careful precision, he squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck true. The bottle teetered, wobbled, and fell perfectly. The crowd erupted in wild applause. Children shouted with delight, adults clapped with admiration, and even Miguel's jaw tightened, betraying a hint of respect he tried to hide. Daniel lowered the rifle, feeling the mixture of exhaustion and quiet triumph settle over him. He had not only met the challenge, but had done so with honesty, focus, and patience. This was more than skill. It was integrity in action. Nayeli stepped forward, her dark eyes meeting Daniel's. "You have shown what true skill and patience look like," she said softly but firmly. "It is not just about hitting the bottles, but how you conduct yourself when tested. That is the measure of a person." Her words carried a depth of understanding that few others could convey. Daniel nodded, recognizing the weight of her approval. It was not about winning a game or showing off. It was about demonstrating character, courage, and respect for the challenge. Miguel, who had initially doubted Daniel, now took a step back. Though he did not speak, his expression softened. He had witnessed a man who could perform under pressure, remain calm in the face of scrutiny, and uphold honesty even when challenged. It was clear that Daniel's success was not the result of luck or trickery, but of steady skill and unwavering focus. The judge raised his hand, signaling the end of the third round. "Let it be known," he said, "that Daniel Hayes has completed the challenge fairly, with skill, composure, and integrity. There can be no doubt that he has earned the honor associated with this contest." The crowd cheered once more, louder than before, their voices blending into a chorus of admiration. Daniel lowered the rifle, feeling a quiet satisfaction. He had proven himself not just to the crowd, but to the standards of honesty, fairness, and patience that mattered most. Nayeli stepped closer to him, a small smile playing on her lips. "You have done more than win a game," she said. "You have shown respect for the rules, for yourself, and for others. That is something many cannot achieve, even when they succeed at first glance." Daniel felt a deep sense of understanding in her words. The challenge had been about more than aim. It had been about character, courage, and integrity. The fairgrounds buzzed with conversation, everyone eager to recount the story of Daniel Hayes, the rancher who had faced the challenge with calm confidence, precision, and unwavering honesty. Vendors approached him, offering congratulations, while children mimicked the stance and aim they had seen moments ago. Daniel accepted the recognition humbly, knowing that this was only one part of the journey. Challenges in life often came in unexpected forms, and this was no different. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the fair, Daniel stepped away from the platform. Blaze nuzzled him gently, sensing his calm satisfaction. Daniel patted the horse's neck, his thoughts turning inward. He had proven his skill, patience, and integrity, but he understood that life would continue to test him in ways far beyond a fairground challenge. Nayeli's presence reminded him that true respect is earned, not given, and that recognition from someone who understands the value of character is far more meaningful than applause from a crowd. In the distance, Miguel quietly left the platform, his expression unreadable. Though he had not spoken words of praise, his actions showed a reluctant acknowledgement of Daniel's abilities. Daniel did not dwell on it. He knew that respect, not rivalry, was the true prize in moments like these. Nayeli remained nearby, her calm presence a reminder of the lessons he had learned. Patience, integrity, and quiet strength often mattered more than any outward display of skill. Daniel took a deep breath, looking around at the fairgrounds, the people, and the fading sunlight. This was a turning point, not just in a contest, but in understanding what true respect and recognition meant. He felt a quiet sense of accomplishment and humility, knowing that while the applause and excitement were fleeting, the lessons he had gained would remain with him for life. The third round had ended, but Daniel's journey was far from over. Challenges, both expected and unforeseen, awaited him. What mattered most was not the bottles he had knocked down, but the courage, patience, and honesty he had demonstrated along the way. As the fair continued around him, Daniel walked with Blaze toward the edge of the clearing, feeling a sense of calm readiness. He knew that the next challenge, whatever it might be, would test not only his skill but the integrity and character he had begun to prove that day. The fairgrounds had quieted somewhat after the third round of the bottle shooting challenge, but the energy in the air was still electric. People lingered near the platform, discussing what they had just witnessed. Daniel Hayes, the rancher who had won not only with skill but with integrity, stood beside Blaze, feeling a sense of calm but alertness. He knew that the true test of a man was never over at the first victory. There were always more challenges, more judgments, and more opportunities to show character. Nayeli, the young Apache woman whose honor had been tied to the challenge, approached him. Her expression was thoughtful but approving. "You have shown great skill," she said softly, "but there is one more test. Not of aim, not of strength, but of patience, fairness, and how you handle respect and responsibility." Daniel listened carefully, intrigued. He had faced physical challenges all his life, but this seemed different, more subtle, more profound. Miguel, who had been watching from the sidelines, stepped back quietly. His earlier doubts had not been entirely erased, but even he could see that Daniel had proven something beyond the power of a rifle. Nayeli continued, "To truly honor this challenge, one must show respect not just to the game, but to everyone involved. You must demonstrate honesty and fairness when no one else expects it, and humility when others praise you." Daniel nodded slowly. He understood that this was not a test of skill, but of character. Life on the ranch had taught him patience and honesty, but he also knew that the lessons he had learned on the open plains were now being measured in a very different way. This test was public, and the eyes of the fair were upon him. Every decision, every action would matter, not just to Nayeli, but to the crowd who had witnessed his earlier triumphs. The judge spoke again, raising a hand to quiet the crowd. "The fourth part of this challenge," he said, "is about how the winner handles responsibility and respect. You will receive the honor associated with the challenge if you show patience, fairness, and integrity in the next steps. This is not simply about shooting bottles. This is about what kind of person you are." Daniel felt a small surge of nerves, but he quickly pushed it aside. He understood that true courage was not about bravado or showmanship. It was about calmness, honesty, and steady character under scrutiny. He looked at Nayeli, who was now smiling faintly. Her approval was quiet but meaningful, a recognition that went far beyond words. The platform was cleared, and the bottles were once again set in neat rows. This time, however, Daniel did not immediately step forward to shoot. Instead, he walked to the edge of the clearing, taking a moment to observe the crowd. Children had gathered close, their wide eyes full of excitement. Families whispered among themselves, eager to see what would happen next. Daniel realized that the crowd itself was part of the challenge. How he handled their curiosity, their expectations, and the subtle pressures of public attention would be as important as his aim. He returned to the platform slowly, setting Blaze's reins carefully so that the horse would remain calm. Daniel took the rifle, but instead of aiming immediately, he spoke to the crowd. "This challenge," he said, his voice calm and steady, "is not only about hitting the bottles. It is about respect for the game, for those who watch, and for the traditions we honor. I will take this carefully, as I should, to show that integrity matters more than speed or applause." The crowd responded with quiet murmurs, some nodding in appreciation. Nayeli's eyes met his, reflecting approval. Daniel's words, calm and measured, conveyed something deeper than skill. They showed respect, patience, and a thoughtful approach to the challenge. This was the final test, and Daniel understood that the stakes were no longer about bottles, applause, or prizes. It was about earning trust and admiration through conduct and character. He raised the rifle again, taking deliberate aim. Each bottle, carefully arranged, reflected sunlight and shimmered with a quiet challenge. Daniel's hand was steady, his eyes focused, and his movements precise. He fired the first shot and the bottle toppled cleanly. The crowd gasped slightly, impressed not only by the shot, but by the calm manner in which he executed it. The second shot followed just as carefully. Daniel's movements were unhurried, yet deliberate. Every bottle fell in turn, each hit demonstrating not only accuracy but control. This round, unlike the previous ones, was as much about the demeanor and calmness he displayed as it was about skill. Daniel felt a quiet satisfaction as he continued, knowing that each shot reinforced the values he wanted to show. As he approached the final row of bottles, he noticed Miguel shifting uneasily in the crowd. Even he could see that Daniel's performance was more than skill. It was a demonstration of character. Daniel's focus never wavered, and his breathing remained steady. He had learned through life on the ranch that patience and calmness could accomplish what raw strength alone never could. Finally, the last bottle stood at the edge, delicate and precarious. Daniel aligned his sights carefully, exhaled slowly, and squeezed the trigger. The bottle wobbled, tipped, and fell perfectly. The crowd erupted in cheers, louder and more appreciative than ever. But Daniel did not raise his arms or celebrate boastfully. Instead, he lowered the rifle and stepped back, letting the applause wash over him with quiet humility. Nayeli approached him once more. "You have done more than hit the bottles," she said softly. "You have shown respect, patience, and integrity. These qualities matter more than any skill alone. That is why the honor of this challenge is truly yours." Daniel felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He realized that the lessons of the ranch, the long days, the quiet patience, and the steady discipline had prepared him not only for contests of skill, but for tests of character. Miguel stepped forward, his expression now less skeptical and more thoughtful. "I misjudged you," he admitted quietly. "I thought this was only about aim, but I see now that skill is nothing without patience and honesty. You have earned this fairly." Daniel nodded, acknowledging the words with humility. He understood that respect earned from others, especially those who had doubted him, was more valuable than any immediate applause or reward. The judge raised his hand, signaling the official conclusion of the fourth round. "Let it be known," he declared, "that Daniel Hayes has demonstrated not only skill but patience, fairness, and integrity. The honor associated with this challenge is rightfully his." The crowd erupted once again, cheering with a mix of excitement and admiration. Children clapped, vendors nodded, and even Miguel gave a small, respectful bow of acknowledgement. Nayeli stepped closer to Daniel, a quiet smile on her face. "It is rare to see someone combine skill with patience and honesty in such a way," she said. "You have proven that true victory is not only in what one can do, but in how one conducts oneself." Daniel felt a quiet warmth in her words. He understood that this was the true prize, not the applause of the crowd, not the recognition from rivals, but the respect and approval of someone who understood the deeper values behind the challenge. The sun was now low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the fairgrounds. Daniel patted Blaze gently and looked around at the crowd, feeling a sense of calm pride. He had faced the challenges fully, demonstrating not only skill but composure, patience, and respect. The applause and cheers were satisfying, but what mattered most was the understanding that he had met the challenge in the right way. As he stepped away from the platform, the crowd continued to talk excitedly about the remarkable rancher who had faced every test calmly and with integrity. Daniel knew that this day would be remembered, not just for the perfect shots, but for the character he had displayed. Nayeli walked alongside him for a moment, and their shared glance spoke of understanding and mutual respect. Daniel realized that life, much like the challenge he had faced, often tested not only what one could do, but who one truly was. Patience, honesty, humility, and respect were the qualities that mattered most. This fourth part of the challenge had shown him, and everyone watching, that true victory was never just about skill or speed, but about integrity and character. The fair continued around them, yet Daniel felt a quiet inner calm. He had faced not only the battles but the expectations, the doubts, and the subtle pressures of those around him. He had emerged not only victorious, but with the approval and respect of those who mattered most. Nayeli's presence was a reminder that recognition from someone who truly understood the values behind the challenge was far more meaningful than applause alone. With the sun dipping lower and the fair buzzing with life, Daniel and Blaze began to step away, knowing that the final part of this journey, the true celebration and reflection of what had been achieved, was about to unfold. The challenge had tested skill, patience, integrity, and humility, and Daniel had passed it all. The final moments of recognition and the lessons learned would stay with him far longer than the fair itself, marking a turning point in his life that would be remembered for years to come. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting a warm golden glow across the fairgrounds. The sounds of laughter, music, and cheerful chatter floated through the air, blending with the faint scent of roasted corn and hay. Daniel Hayes walked slowly alongside Blaze, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a challenge fully met. His arms were tired from handling the rifle, and his back ached slightly from the long day, but his mind was clear, calm, and proud. This was more than victory. It was a moment that would stay with him for life. The crowd lingered, some still discussing the remarkable performance they had witnessed. Parents held their children a little closer so they could see the platform where Daniel had proven his skill and integrity. Traders and vendors leaned on their booths, exchanging stories and compliments. Even Miguel, the rival rancher who had doubted Daniel's ability at first, stood quietly to the side, watching with a thoughtful expression. There was respect in his eyes now, the kind that comes not from winning, but from recognizing true character. Nayeli approached Daniel, her calm presence cutting through the buzz of the fair. She carried herself with quiet grace, her braids swaying gently as she walked. Her dark eyes held a mix of admiration and amusement, and her smile was subtle but genuine. "You have done more than win a challenge," she said softly. "You have shown patience, skill, and respect. That is far rarer than anyone realizes." Daniel looked at her, feeling a warmth in his chest he had not expected. "I only tried to do what was right," he replied, "to respect the challenge, the rules, and everyone who watched." Nayeli nodded, her expression thoughtful. "And that is why this is not just a test of aim or strength. It is a test of character. You have passed it fully." Her words were quiet, yet they carried weight and sincerity that made the applause of the crowd seem distant in comparison. The judge stepped forward, raising his hands to quiet the remaining spectators. "Let it be declared," he announced, "that Daniel Hayes has completed the challenge in every sense. Not only has he proven skill with the rifle, but he has shown patience, fairness, integrity, and respect. The honor of this challenge is rightfully his." The crowd erupted into applause once again, louder than before. Children clapped excitedly, adults nodded in approval, and vendors stepped from their booths to congratulate him. Daniel felt a sense of calm pride. This was a victory not only for skill but for character, something that mattered far more than temporary fame. He lowered the rifle, feeling its weight as a reminder of the journey he had just completed. Miguel finally stepped forward, his expression softer than it had been all day. "I misjudged you," he admitted quietly, almost to himself. "I thought this was just about hitting bottles, but I see now that it is about patience, honesty, and calmness under pressure. You have earned this fairly, and I respect that." Daniel nodded, accepting the acknowledgement with quiet humility. He had faced doubt, competition, and pressure, and had emerged with honor intact. Nayeli extended her hand toward him, not as a prize, but as a gesture of mutual respect. "Come, Daniel," she said, smiling gently. "It is time to celebrate what has been accomplished, not with prideful boasting, but with quiet acknowledgement and gratitude." Daniel took her hand, feeling a sense of warmth and connection. There was no need for grand gestures or words. The moment itself spoke volumes. The fair continued around them, full of music, laughter, and energy, but Daniel and Nayeli found a small space to stand apart from the crowd. Children waved excitedly and vendors cheered, but the two of them shared a quiet understanding. It was not about winning a challenge or receiving applause. It was about the respect, trust, and character demonstrated along the way. Daniel thought back to the long day, the tension of the first challenge, the doubts raised by Miguel, the careful focus required for each shot, and the approval he had earned from Nayeli. Each moment had tested him in different ways, but he had remained calm, patient, and honest. He realized that these qualities were the true prize, far more valuable than any applause, prize, or recognition from strangers. Naeli looked at him, her expression gentle but firm. "You have shown what it means to be honorable," she said. "Skill alone is not enough. Patience, integrity, and respect are what truly make a person admirable." Daniel nodded, feeling the truth in her words. He had always known that hard work and skill mattered, but today had taught him that character mattered even more. As the sun dipped lower, casting long golden shadows across the fairgrounds, the ceremony for the challenge began. The judge handed Daniel a beautifully woven Apache blanket, a symbol of honor and respect, not a trophy for victory alone. The crowd cheered once more, but Daniel felt that the true reward was the recognition of his integrity and patience, qualities that had carried him through not just this challenge, but life on the ranch as well. Naeli invited Daniel to join in a traditional dance, a gesture of acceptance and respect. Daniel stepped forward, feeling slightly nervous but honored. The dance was gentle, a celebration of the challenge and the values it represented. It was not a display of pride, but a quiet acknowledgement of achievement, patience, and mutual respect. The rhythm of the dance, the warmth of Naeli's smile, and the quiet support of the crowd made Daniel feel a deep sense of fulfillment. The dance ended, and the fairgrounds continued to buzz with excitement. Daniel returned to Blaze, patting the horse's neck gently. He thought about the day, the tests of skill, the challenges of patience, and the moments that had required integrity and honesty. Each step had been a learning experience, and he knew that the lessons would stay with him long after the applause had faded. Miguel approached one last time, tipping his hat in acknowledgement. "You have done well, Daniel," he said simply. "Not just with the rifle, but with your character." Daniel nodded, understanding that respect earned from others, even rivals, was more meaningful than any fleeting applause. As the sun set, casting a warm golden light over the fairgrounds, Daniel and Naeli walked together toward the edge of the event. There was no need for words. The shared understanding and mutual respect spoke louder than any conversation could. Daniel felt a quiet pride and calm satisfaction, knowing that he had not only proven his skill but had demonstrated patience, integrity, and respect, qualities that mattered far more than any fleeting victory. The crowd slowly began to disperse, the laughter and music fading into the evening. Daniel and Blaze walked slowly, reflecting on the events of the day. The challenge had tested more than aim. It had tested character, patience, and composure. Daniel realized that these qualities were what truly defined him, and what would guide him in future challenges, both expected and unforeseen. As the night fell, Daniel looked once more at Naeli, feeling a quiet sense of connection and understanding. It was not about romance or possession, but about mutual respect, admiration, and the recognition of values shared and demonstrated. The day's lessons, the importance of patience, honesty, humility, and courage, would stay with him forever, guiding not only his actions on the ranch but in all aspects of life. Finally, Daniel and Blaze made their way home, the fair fading behind them, leaving memories of a day that tested skill, integrity, and character. Daniel knew that the applause, the recognition, and the challenge itself were only temporary, but the lessons and the respect earned were lasting.